Hey everyone, I'm Cary Smith and I'm sitting here with Cheri Turner.
Hi.
And Cheri and I are both with Client First Capital. And Cheri, we have such a good topic today. So today we're talking about a thoughtful approach to spending in an uncertain economy.
Right.
And so, as people are thinking about retirement, planning for retirement, or maybe even living in retirement, it's more important, I think, than ever to be thinking about um, spending and making sure that we're doing it in a mindful or thoughtful or purposeful, whatever word you want to use. We want to make sure that when we're spending, it's adding real value.
Mhm.
And so, I think most people have probably been in a situation where they've added something to their online cart
Oh, yeah.
because at the time or at the moment you felt that you needed it or you really, really wanted it. And it maybe even gave you a little bit of an excitement, right, when you put it in your cart and made that purchase.
Right.
But I know people know this, but we forget about it when we're online. But this process is designed to be faster and more efficient than ever.
Right.
And by being faster and more efficient, a lot of times we bypass that process for us to stop and think about, do I need this? Does it make sense for me? Is this money well spent?
Mhm.
And so, and although this applies to everyone, if you're out there and you're approaching retirement, um, this tension can actually feel stressful,
Yes.
and it's not a healthy stress.
No.
So, today what we're going to talk about is helping people slow things down, reconnect with their values, and
Mhm.
spend in a way that's just that's smarter, and also satisfying.
Yes.
And by satisfying, what I think we mean by that is it aligns with our values, it aligns with our priorities,
Mhm.
right? And it enriches our life, and it's not just in the moment, feeling good.
Right.
And so, why don't you kind of give us a rundown of what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll get into the meat of the topic.
Sure. Yes. In today's video, we'd like to cover why mindful spending is more important than ever, how our tech-driven buy now culture really influences our habits, and then practical ways that you can make spending decisions that support rather than sabotage your long-term goals.
Okay, so Cherie, thank you. So I think a really good place for us to start um, is looking at the economic reality that we're living in today. So let's start there.
Absolutely. Well, to state the obvious, the economic backdrop right now is complicated to say the least. Inflation may be cooling a bit, but it's still running higher than we want. Groceries, insurance premiums, travel, even basic services, they all cost much more than they did just 1 or 2 years ago. So, meanwhile, the market's been a roller coaster. If you're already retired and pulling from your portfolio, you know how nerve wracking it can be when your account values dip, especially early in retirement. This is what we call the sequence of returns risk, when withdrawing during a down market can cause long term damage to your nest egg. So, if your spending has quietly crept up, or if impulse purchases have started to feel a little out of control, now is the perfect time to pause and reevaluate.
Yeah. So Cherie, it's funny how quickly things can change because, a year ago, sequence of returns risk was something we talked about that you might have to deal with in your portfolio at some future point.
Mhm.
Today, it's a conversation that we're having with clients and potential clients as something that we're having to employ those strategies
Exactly.
today. So things can change pretty quick.
Right.
So there's that economic reality can put a little more stress on our decision making and highlight the importance. The next thing that we should talk about is, but how do we operate in this buy now world
Right.
that it's not set up to help us make smart decisions.
Right.
And so what are the thoughts on how we better survive in that world.
Right. Well, the way we shop now really isn't helping. So here's the thing. We're not just facing this economic pressure, but we're also living in a culture of hyper convenient consumption. So we used to drive to the store to make purchases. We used to shop comparisons. And now we scroll, we tap, and we buy. It's all so quick and so easy. And the retailers all know how to work with our psychology. They use urgency, like sale ends at midnight, or they use scarcity, only one left, or they even use personalization. People like you are buying. And these aren't accidents. They're engineered to override our logic and to activate our emotions. Americans actually spent a record $1.29 trillion online in 2023, and impulse buying has increased by more than 70% since the pandemic. So in a moment, it might feel like you're treating yourself. But when the credit card bills come in, or when you look at your long-term retirement plans, those same purchases can actually feel more like self-sabotage than self-care.
Yeah. So I don't expect retailers are going to have anything that says consumers like you stop and think about their priorities first before they make this purchase, right?
Yeah,
And so we're not going to see technology like that anytime
yeah,
soon.
yeah.
But to your point, in a lot of these websites, you don't even enter your credit card anymore. It's saved on your phone or your
Mhm.
iPad or your computer, and it's already there. You just have to enter, right? You just have to do one click, and you've made the purchase, right? And so
Yeah.
they've done a really great job of removing the friction from
Mhm.
that process.
Yes.
But I would say the friction shows up somewhere else in your life, and
Mhm.
that friction might show up in your retirement savings, or your ability to enjoy other aspects of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So when we think about mindful spending and what that really means, it's not deprivation and it's not guilt. It's more mindful spending. By that, it's about creating space between the urge and the action. It's about making sure your money goes towards the things that genuinely support your values, your goals, and your peace of mind. It means asking ourselves, do I really need this, or am I trying to fix a feeling? Will this bring lasting joy or just a momentary distraction? Or if I say yes to this, what am I going to have to say no to? I often tell my clients, your spending should reflect your values. So if peace, freedom, and security are values that you care about, that needs to show up in how you spend.
So I would say, Cheri, that the peace of mind that you get from being mindful and purposeful in
Yes.
your spending
Mhm.
is a far greater good feeling than the short term excitement of spending for something that you may not have needed to begin with.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
so let's talk about so what are some of the habits? What are practical things that we can do that help reinforce the right decisions? And I love what you just said, that your spending aligns with your values.
Mhm, mhm. So here are a few tools that I recommend to my clients, especially those navigating retirement or possibly rebuilding life after a major change. The first is the 24-hour rule. If you're about to spend more than $100 on a non-essential, hit pause or sleep on it. You'll be amazed how many must-haves become by morning. You realize you didn't really need it and don't really care.
Okay.
Another is to audit your joy per dollar. Take a look at your recent purchases and which ones still really bring satisfaction in a week or a month later, and which ones didn't. This reflection really helps you to spot patterns and to break the ones that aren't serving you. The other is to set shopping boundaries. Really know yourself and your danger zones. For some people, it might be late night shopping. For others, it's the pop-ups that come up on your browser. So limit your exposure by either unsubscribing to certain things or setting screen time limits on your browsers so that you're not constantly bombarded with those. And another, which we just referenced, is to create a values-based spending plan. So instead of focusing only on budgeting by category, think about budgeting by priority. Travel to see your family, spend on your continuing education, spend for your own health and wellness, or giving to causes that you personally care about. When you spend towards your values, the temptation to fill voids with impulse purchases often fades.
Yeah. So I don't think hardly ever, if ever, when someone spends aligned to their values, if it's travel to see family or travel for a new experience or whatever, you listed some really good things there. I don't think we ever really have buyer's remorse
Right.
when we're spending with our values the way we do when we're spending impulsively. And in fact, some people begin, to have that remorse the second they hit enter. And if they're shopping in the middle of the night, they often regret it before they go back to sleep.
Right.
And where when you spend with your priorities, you rarely, if ever, regret it.
Right. Very true. Yeah.
Okay. So, so in real life, what do we see in real life?
Well, the truth is, when most clients aren't coming to us because they've completely blown it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're coming because they want to feel intentional. They want to know that their money is serving them, not the other way around. I've worked with women who went through difficult divorces and suddenly had to take full control of their own finances. Or some widows, after losing their partners, suddenly found themselves solely responsible for managing the money they once shared, and they feel paralyzed by the fear of making a wrong move. I've also worked with retirees who were afraid they were enjoying life too much, even when they could more than afford it.
Yeah.
So in each of these cases, mindful spending helped bring clarity and calm.
Yeah. So, and you said earlier, you don't have to do without. So, for some people, a priority could be, they want to dress nice and in fashion, and and how they look is a priority for them.
Right.
Well, then make it a priority, and then don't lavishly spend on things that don't align with that priority.
Right.
And people, it's like there's no judgment on what your priorities are, but make sure your spending aligns with those priorities so that you're living the life that you design for yourself and want to live.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly right.
All right. So any other thoughts on this? What I think is a great topic.
I would just say, we're not saying that you have to choose between joy and discipline. You can spend in a way that really reflects who you are and what you care about, even in this buy now world and this uncertain economic environment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Cheri, I think this was a great topic. It's a topic that not just people planning to retire need to hear. It's a topic I think everyone needs to hear. It almost should be a college course, right?
Yes.
Mindful
Yes.
spending.
We're all the temptation.
That's right. And so I thank you for bringing this topic to us. And I think this was a good discussion. Hey, if you like this topic, give us a thumbs up. It also helps other people find this topic as well as others. Also, you can find us at clientfirstcap.com. From there, you can get a link to other videos that we have, as well as sign up for our monthly newsletter. Or if you feel like you need to speak to someone about retirement planning or your financial future, you can reach out to us from our website. But I thank you for joining us. Thank you, Cheri.
Thank you, Cary.